In this video, we're going to take a look at our uncollectible accounts and see that we know how to make the journal entry for them and how we calculate the amounts that go into the adjusting journal entry. So first things first, at the end of every year, a public company will estimate the amount of sales that won't be collected. And so it will be the adjusting entry. When they do that, you'll debit your uncollectible accounts expense, make the expense go up, and that's so that we can match our revenues with our expenses. Our revenues were earned during this period, and these expenses are due to those revenues being earned. So we need to make sure we include them in the same accounting period. And secondly, we'll credit the allowance for uncollectible accounts, which is a contra to accounts receivable. So we are increasing our allowance for uncollectible accounts. During the year, following after that, we might figure out this is the person who isn't going to pay us, so we'll write off their account. We'll debit the uncollectible accounts, and we'll credit our accounts receivable. So you'll see that those are the contra and then the account that the account is contra to. And then maybe they pay us back, so we'd have to write them back on. And, then we actually record the receipt of the payment, and again, those entries we should know pretty easily. The main two that we're focusing on are the first two. And we need to know what's the impact on the actual accounts receivable. What's the impact on our assets of our company. In the first entry, in our adjusting entry, that will actually decrease our accounts receivable. Why? Because we are increasing the contra account. A credit to a contra asset is an increase to the account. In the second entry, when we simply write off an account, we actually have no impact on our assets. The asset is going down, it's being credited, and the contra is going down because the contra asset is being debited. We're just figuring out this is who isn't going to pay. We estimated that a whole bunch of people wouldn't pay us, and now this is one of those people. Just to fill in the gaps, the last two, it's not as important, but again, no impact. The contra goes up, the asset goes up, and we're just assuming it'll be someone else. We were just wrong. We just figured it'd be someone else who won't pay us. And then lastly, when we actually would receive the receipt of a payment, it would decrease our accounts receivable. Why? Because we actually have the cash now. All right, so let's look at a couple examples. Microsofty, they sell small pillows. They have these transactions regarding their accounts receivable from the first 2 years of their operations. So the first year, throughout the year, they're going to make sales on account, like any good company would. And they'll debit accounts receivable and credit sales. At the end of the year, they're going to estimate that $10,000 of the accounts receivable will be uncollectible. So they would debit their uncollectible accounts expense, credit the allowance for uncollectible accounts. They've just made their accounts receivable balance go down by $10,000 by increasing the contra account over here. So making this go up makes accounts receivable go down. Hopefully we picked up on that last second. Second year, we go ahead and we write off $8,000 throughout the year. It could be a number of customers, could be one customer, it really doesn't matter. So we write them off. You debit your uncollectible accounts for $8,000. We credit our accounts receivable. At the end of the year, we still have a balance of $2,000 in our uncollectible accounts. We can see last year we estimated $10,000. We only wrote off $8,000, so we still have a $2,000 balance. That tells us last year's estimate was too high. We got to think, well, how does that impact the rest of the financial statements? At the end of the year, though, we figure that for the next year's worth of sales, that $7,000 will be uncollectible. So what's the adjustment we need? Remember, we already have a $2,000 balance in the uncollectible account. So now what we're going to do is we're going to debit our uncollectible accounts for expense for $5,000 and then credit the allowance for uncollectible accounts for $5,000. Since the company already had the $2,000 balance, we only need to adjust for the $5,000 difference. Also, last year we recorded $2,000 of too much expense. Again, we estimated $10,000, but then only wrote off $8,000. So our expense was too high last year. So this year, we get to record $2,000 of less expense. Over the course of the 2 years, the estimate balances out. And that is perfectly acceptable according to the SEC and GAAP. So again, let's look at a very similar problem. Same first year. Everything is exactly the same. Estimate $10,000 of uncollectible accounts. But in the second year, say we write off $13,000 as uncollectible. Well, that's not 13. Let's say we wrote off $14,000 as uncollectible. So you debit the uncollectible accounts $14,000, you credit accounts receivable $14,000, and now at the end of the year we have a debit balance of $4,000 in our uncollectible accounts. Last year's estimate was too low by $4,000. We estimated $10,000. We ended up writing off $14,000. At the end of the year, we estimate again that only $7,000 will be uncollectible. So what's the adjustment we need? Well, now we need to adjust for more than $7,000. So we're going to debit our uncollectible accounts expense 11 and credit our uncollectible account contra account for 11 also. Since the company had a $4,000 debit balance, in other words, our estimate was too low, we need to adjust for $11,000 to make up for the prior year's low estimate. Because in the first year we essentially recorded $4,000 of too little expense, so we get to record $4,000 of additional expense this year. Again, over the course of 2 years, the estimate balances out. Make sure you can think through this process. If you need to watch it again, that's fine. And be prepared to do something of this sort on an exam.